Are we set to go? Okay, welcome to the April 28th special meeting of the Municipal Building Commission. It's 5:30. Call the meeting to order and ask Jeremy to call the roll and establish a quorum.
All right. Ed. Here. Terry.
Here.
Jerry. Jerry, you here?
We can see you.
We look for Terry or Jerry?
Sorry, Jerry.
Jerry, I'm here, yeah.
Sorry, I'm muffled in this thing. Andrew.
Here.
Jackie.
Here.
Kelly.
Muted. Here.
Gail.
Here.
Mike.
Here.
And Jack.
Here.
Got a full house.
We got a full house, great. Mark Zawadzki is with us. He's our consultant for this project, if that's a proper term, Mark. Some of us know you, but perhaps you could introduce yourself?
Thank you. Appreciate being here. Yes, I do see a number of friendly faces. I wish we could all be together, but it is what it is. So Jack was correct. I served the city of Attleboro during the construction of the DPW facility, as well as the water department building and the demolition of the Swank manufacturing property and numerous other projects around the city a few years back. When I understood that you had a need here, I submitted on it, and I've been engaged for a limited role, initially to serve as what Jack said as a construction consultant, and I was engaged to assist the city in writing the AERFP, which you have before you, and hopefully you've all read. A moment of history here. The RFQ was published with the Central Register, a local newspaper, for March 24th. We had a on-site pre-response walkthrough on April 5th of both the Union Street headquarters as well as the Briggs Corner on Park. On April 9th, there was a deadline for questions for which there were no questions submitted that required any addendum or clarification. We had a good turnout at the pre-response get-together. And I think all 8 firms that were in attendance that day actually submitted. The bid responses were due on the 22nd of April. And obviously, as you know, this evening's meeting is to review and assess those in a comparative criteria. And Jack can talk a little bit more about that. So I look forward to assisting you to the extent you need any.
So just for those watching at home, this project is to replace the roof of the Central Fire Station and the Briggs Corner Fire Station. And so in the past, we have tried to do all sorts of mathematical calculations, none of which really were helpful. We tried to assign a certain number of points to each of the criteria. And what we found is that, you know, if it was 20 points maximum for this, some people gave a 20, and if they didn't like the applicant, you know, their application, gave them a 16, and other people gave the people who they thought were good an 11, and those were bad a 2, and so the numbers just didn't add up. So what I'm thinking we should do tonight is, and we want to interview at our meeting next week, which will be at Studley School. And Mark, we hope you can be there with us. And so what we'll do next week is we will do the library and pay whatever bills we have to pay. And then perhaps starting at maybe 6:15 and doing half-hour blocks, interview the top 3 that we choose from the 8 who have applied for this job. And at the end of that, do another evaluation and choose who we'll recommend to the mayor that the city contract with for this project. So my thought is that we ought to rank them 1 to 8. And I guess with 1 being the best and 8 being the worst, and whoever gets the fewest points or the bottom 3 would be the 3 that we would interview. That's at least my thought going into this. Mark, I don't know if you have any preliminary thoughts you want to share on the 8 applicants?
Sure. Well, what I'd like to do, just take a moment, is to review the criteria, and I'll put that up on the screen if that's okay.
Sure thing.
Within the RFQ document on page 7 of 23 of the RFQ on the screen, I hope you can all see it.
We can.
Having to do with evaluation and selection criteria. So there were 3 main areas. One was related experience. And I guess I will start off by saying that by virtue of the fact that all of the firms that responded are licensed architects or engineers, they are all qualified to do this work. What your job is to compare on a comparative evaluation basis which one or which of the potential respondents you want to interview to take to the next level. So the related experience, that is previous experience on similar projects, the quality, we left it the opportunity to interview previous projects and previous owners to find out their experience working with the respondents and how much of the work is public sector based. What is their knowledge base with public construction laws, because Massachusetts is relatively unique within the country. So related experience was all evaluative criteria 1. 2 was the team, the qualifications and involvement of key personnel, including their sub-consultants, because not only do we need an architect, we need a RRC or a registered roofing consultant, we need a structural engineer to validate that the new roofing system will be supported properly on the building. We needed code officials to make sure that the building, that the project was done in accordance with Chapter 34 of the building code. And we needed hazardous materials consultants. All this is what it takes in order to do a job properly. So did they include a team, and how do you feel about that team? And then finally, the work plan. This is an accelerated project. We hope, the fire chief hopes, and the city hopes that the work will be able to be completed before the winter of 2021. So the timeline that I had assembled with Jack and Jeremy's assent was to accelerate the process, engage a firm, have them do the design, put it out to bid, and have the work actually executed prior to the snow falling in 2021. So these are the 3 elements of the evaluative criteria. So other than that, I'm here as an observer or as facilitator, someone here to help guide you. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them as the author of this document.
Okay. So before we start discussing them, does anybody have any questions on what Mark's presented? Hearing silence, does somebody want to volunteer to share their thoughts? Ed, do you want to do that?
Share my thoughts okay, on what?
On the 8 applicants?
Okay, yes, I will. I think this is the first time we've had them electronically, been able to do searches and so forth. So I did an extensive search on all of the criteria that was developed by Jeremy, and I assigned value to each of those and came up with a numbering that is, the number itself doesn't mean much, but its relationship to the other numbers is I'm able to derive a rank of all of the applicants.
So were there any that you categorically felt were poor?
Well, I have got them in rank order.
Okay, well, why don't you
on each one?
Why don't you share with us your rank order then?
Okay, my rank order, significant difference between them, by the way. There's RBA at a number that's, by my system, 2,049. DIG, 1,496, CBI, 1160, RGB, 1001, ROW, 797, MMT, 466, and UDA I did not do. That's the,
Only 7.
Who's your number two?
number 2 was DIG.
What about? Was I only see-
GRLA.
Yeah.
Where
that's-
were they?
Say that again, please.
GRLA.
916, that was
Okay, I missed.
5
They were 5?
in my, yes.
Okay.
GRLA, okay. Anything that you want to comment on that stood out that made you rank RBA so far up?
Well, they seem to respond.
And is RBA Russo Bar Associates?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Their responses were far in excess of anyone else. And as I checked these items, I found that they had responded really well to the evaluation criteria. What else?
You said, I thought you said DIG. Did you mean,
Yeah,
is that DAI, DiGiorno Associates Ed?
yeah.
Okay.
And RBA also only used the term, the town of Attleboro once. They refer at all other times to the city of Attleboro.
That's a disqualification usually for Jackie. Who else would like to share some thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go next.
Okay, Jerry.
My top 3 were RBA as the number 1. Number 2 was CBI. And number 3 was RGB. These aren't big buildings that we're talking about here. They're small jobs. Any one of these companies is qualified to do the design work of what we're asking of them. RBA has done work for the city before. We've been happy with them. They just got through doing the 2 other schools for us. They've done hundreds and hundreds of projects and of all different categories. And I feel as though they had the most to offer to the city of Attleboro.
Who did you have in 4th place, Jerry?
Let's see, what do I have in 4th place? I had a tie of Rouse and D. Gigio, however you pronounce that.
DiGiorno?
Yeah.
DII and Rouse. Okay, that's interesting. Kelly.
I have a couple of notes that I wanted to share for, I'm probably going to mispronounce it now, DiGiorno, is that correct?
Yeah.
So looking through their proposal, there were several typos where they were talking about the school or the school being occupied and working with the school committee. And it seemed like it was a copy and paste job off of another job and that they didn't really look at the proposal to make sure that they cleaned that up. So I kind of dinged them on that and ranked them a little bit lower because it looked like an attention to detail problem. There were places where they mentioned the fire department and then other places where they mentioned the school, like it was a school that we would be working on. So I did rank them lower for that. And then another note I have here, just move over to my Excel here. For Edward Rouse, I marked them down a bit because I thought that their project approach statement was pretty generic. They didn't really seem to include a very good timeline for each of the phases, and no specific time frame for each phase. No idea how much time they were allocating to each phase of the project, based on what I could see. And as for the bid documents, it is all unknown. We don't know because we don't know their timeline. I had to put a lower ranking for those 2 criteria on the Excel sheet. Other than that, I thought a lot of these companies had very comparable points and experience levels. I really did pay attention to that detail to make sure that they knew what the project was, that they understood some of the uniqueness of the project being a fire department and an operational building that'd be occupied when being worked on. So those were my big highlights.
So who did you rank as your top, say, 4?
So I have actually my top 3 here,
All right.
RBA,
Yeah.
CBI, and RGB were my top 3.
Okay. Then let's, Mike Tyler, I see you. What were your thoughts, Mike?
Good afternoon. Sure, I think I agree with most of the majority. I think all of them could definitely handle the scope of the projects that's in front of them on this one. My rating was CBI was number 1, DiGiorgio was number 8, GRLA was 5, MMT is 6, RBA was 2nd, RGB was 3rd, Rouse was 7th, and UDA was 4th.
So you had CBI as number 1, Russo Bar as number 2?
Russo Bar is number 2, and RGB as number 3.
RGB is number 3. Okay. All right. Terry.
Okay. I'm just going to quickly go through them, then I'll do the comments afterwards. Number 1 was RBA. Number 2 was UDA. Number 3 was RGB. Number 4 was MMT. Do you want me to go any further?
Probably not have to.
Okay. So on number 1, I thought obviously we know them and they put an RFQ well together. It was clearly defined. There was plenty of project examples. On number 2, which was UDA, they had stated dedicated 3 full-time architectural personnel. I don't know if that's an additional cost. And then they have fire station roof replacement experience. They also had 9 trees, an approximate date of substantial completion of the project. And I just had a question if that's realistic.
I don't think so.
Huh?
I don't think so.
I think
No,
that's a
but I
realistic
noted
kickoff.
it. And then number 3, RGB. I kind of gigged them because they had no time commitment, but on their proposal, their RFQ, it shows each phase with an approximate number of days for each phase, but it doesn't show an actual timeline. And in the RFQ on the submission requirements, it says an anticipated project milestone schedule. So I don't know, maybe Mark can clarify what that really means.
Well, it's interesting that you picked up on the time. So first of all, the RFQ that we developed had a milestone schedule that many of those included. So I'll just pull that up. And so what we had was obviously the designer procurement period. The design was through 7/7, procurement through 8/20 for construction, and then the work from the end of August through early December. So from a time perspective, the higher ranked firms, my comparative evaluation, were ones that took influence from this schedule, that reiterated it with their own interpretation and spin on it, and actually did present an actual Gantt chart or schedule. So I thought that, at least from my perspective, the higher ranked firms were the ones that showed the schedule and validated it. So that was one differentiator in my review of these documents.
So would you consider RGB's explanation a schedule?
No, first of all, I did not consider that a schedule. I considered it a set of parameters.
Yeah.
Another evaluative criteria that I used was not necessarily on, it was the team, those being proposed. And having been representing the city in the past, one of the things that I observed is that some AET respondents and organizations utilize architects and highly qualified, highly licensed individuals for what we call construction administration, that is boots on the ground. And as an evaluative criteria, some firms had RRCs, registered roofing consultants, and licensed architects or registered architects. So I think that that was another evaluative criteria in which you could find substantial differentiators.
What's your feeling on project managers being out to oversee everything?
Well, it depends on their qualifications. This was an RFQ, a request for qualifications. So if one company is representing or indicating that they're going to have an individual who's not a licensed architect or not a professional engineer or
Right.
have the RRC certifications, I would think that the city would rank them a tad bit lower than an organization that was paying for all that expertise and training.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew? You're muted. You're still muted. You're still muted.
Well,
There you go.
All right. I had CBI as number 1, Russo Bar number 2, RGB number 3, DiGiorgio number 4. And you want me to go on further?
I think that's probably far enough. Any comments that you want to add to what's already been said?
No, just CBI stuck out to me for their preliminary report. It looked like they were a little more thorough in their on-site visits and reiterated what they saw and what they might be concerned with. And then they had their Gantt chart for the schedule. Russo Bar for their previous experience with the city, and RGB. Then going down from there, everyone else looked kind of cookie cutter, or it doesn't look like they put too much into packaging up the proposals.
Okay, thank you. Gail?
Hi, I had CBI and RBA as a tie at the top, at 1.
Yeah.
I had UDA as the second. And then I guess DiGiorgio is the third. I mean, RBA, the name speaks for itself. We've had a lot of experience with them. I think we know what they're all about. What I liked about CBI, I thought it was well presented. It was very detailed project approach, and they had experience with the online, like the online bidding, which is always a plus too. UDA, I actually liked their presentation and their cover letter. They did refer to us as a town, so they got dinged a little bit, but I overlooked that. It looked like they had a good work experience, a good work plan. I like how that was all spelled out there. And they had a decent schedule and they had plenty of roof experience. I ranked RGB lower because it didn't look like they had a lot of Massachusetts experience. And then all the others were really kind of marked really low in my book. So.
Okay. Jackie?
Okay, about the same as everybody else. I liked, I had CBI, RBA, Russo Bar, and then RGB, and then the others kind of blended all together. I like CBI's preliminary work. As Andrew said, they did a lot of pre-work. If anybody had any questions about the need for roofs, all they had to do was look at the presentation from CBI. because those roofs were extremely obvious, the damage and problems. And I kind of like the fact that they put that much effort into the preliminaries. So those were my top three choices, CBI, RBA, and RGB.
Okay, I think everybody but me has spoken. There were a few, like one who thought we were doing a boiler project that caused me to mark them down. But I was very impressed with what CBI did, the amount of work that they put into it, and I ranked them number one. And I had RBA, Russo Bar, as number two because they had a good application and we've had great experience with them. I had DiGiorgio, DAI, I guess, as number three, and I had RGB as number four. So I think what we need to do, well, first of all, let me ask Mark if there's anything you want to add to what you've heard, any rankings, even though you don't get a vote, as to anything you'd like to share?
Well, thank you. So I did my own evaluative criteria. I did the 1 through 8 ranking, and I believe the consensus of this, are you a committee? Did I my commission?
Yeah.
I think the consensus of the commission here is spot on. I thought, and rightfully so, the amount of work that CBI put into it, I think far exceeded that of just about anyone else in terms of presenting a preliminary observational report that would serve as the basis. They've already, in essence, started on the project, if you will. And I thought that that was an approach to it. They did have a schedule. They did meet all of the boxes. They had a very talented staff that were all licensed and registered and certified. So I agree with the high ranking of CBI. Similarly, I agree with the high ranking of Russo Bar. Obviously, they have experience within the city. They have a talented workforce. Their approach, although they are a smaller company, if you do an if you do an evaluation between CBI, which is part of a much larger company, and Russo Bar, you'll find that their staffing levels. So an interesting question to ask RBA, Russo Bar, in an interview is what is their current workload and their commitment and capacity to do this project. So I think that that's something. And similarly, I had the same comments for DiGiorgio, and obviously the city knows RGB from its prior work. And if I had to ding them at all, I would have done so only because of the proposed staff. So, but I think that from my notes, you're ranking CBI, Russo Bar, DiGiorgio, and RGB, I think, as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I don't really have anything that would that. And I would expect that they would all appear for an interview if invited.
So I guess the question is, yeah, I think the consensus is CBI and RBA, certainly. But group, would you like to interview 4 and say, oh, Terry's got her hand raised. Terry?
I just have a question for Mark. CBI, I found the project manager only had 12 years experience and the assistant project manager only had 6 years experience. Do you think that comes into play at all, or? And this is total experience. It's not with that company.
Right. I think that this is a Ronald Reagan moment where he won't penalize his his opponent for his youth and inexperience. Honestly, these are licensed professionals. They are qualified. I don't know that you need to have 35 or 40 years experience in order to do it. In fact, some would argue, not me, I'm just postulating that the younger folks, like the internet, have a much greater awareness of newer products and the products that are actually being used in this day and age, as opposed to an old timer like me, who who is a subject matter expert in products and materials of 20, 30, and 40 years ago. So I would not personally penalize them for having 6 to 12 years of experience. I think it's ample experience, and they're overseen by their principal, who is hands-on and allocated to the project. So I thought that they put together a good package.
I agree. I just held that against them.
Okay, well.
So I guess it's only an investment of time for us. Do we want to interview 4 as opposed to 3? And
I would say yes.
Yes, I would say yes too.
And I agree.
And so, you know, if we look at, without having Jeremy do a formal scoring yet, you know, a couple of people mentioned, you know, a few others like UDA got mentioned a couple of times, but it seems from looking at this that the consensus would be CBI, RBA, DAI, and RGB. The 4 of those would be the 4 that, if we did a numerical scoring, would come out as the top 4. Is there a feeling among the commission that we should interview those 4? And do we want to let Jeremy do some numbers before we talk any further about that?
I think it's a tie between UDA and DeGiorgio.
I agree. And actually, I'd like to hear other thoughts on UDA. Like, I didn't hear them mentioned a lot when people were talking about them, and I had them ranked pretty high up there.
I did too, Gail. I thought a lot of them. They had a lot of municipal roofs, fire station roof replacement experience.
Right. I saw that. Yep.
Thank you.
I'm just looking to
Great
see.
minds think alike.
Yep, that's right. I just really like their project plan. I thought it was.
Yeah. I like CBI, but I digged them because of the experience. Dinged them, I should say.
Well, why don't we have Jeremy do some scoring then?
Are we doing the top 4 or are we doing the top 3?
Well, we were going to do 3, but if it's close, we've done 4 in the past, and I don't mind spending another half hour to make sure we do this right.
Right.
So Jeremy's trying to do some numbers.
Yeah, my only comment on UDA is that their team did not identify specifically the structural engineer or some of the hazardous. Their team was more limited than any of the, I don't want to say than any other, that's all or nothing. They seem to have a less complete team than the other higher ranked firms discussed this evening. So I'll just point that out. Not to say that they're not qualified. I just didn't see within the 4 corners of their document the full complete team and how they've worked together in the past. So if I can.
Yeah, I mean, I had them 6th. I noticed that it's a 3-person firm, 3 architects, only 1 who's registered in Massachusetts, if I'm reading the right one. And the principal in charge, Kevin Muniak, is you know, basically the owner of the firm. So that, you know, would give me something to say, all right, that's good. But then it looks like basically everything else is a sub-consultant rather than somebody who's inside their firm. Does that mean anything to you? Because obviously Russo Bar uses consultants, and I don't know that we should mark down smaller firms just because they you know, don't have a staff of 30 people. But I thought that I wasn't particularly impressed with them, but I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again.
Along that same line of thinking, I did have some notes for GRLA that I thought was interesting. What stood out in theirs for me, and I ranked them a little bit higher than some of the others, is that they had some minority and women-owned business enterprises as their sub-consultants. And I really appreciated them having that in there. I didn't see that in many of the other, I think in any of the other proposals that we reviewed.
I'm not sure, though, that they finished in the top 4. Oh, yes, they did. On Terry's, they were 4th.
They were 4th on
GRLA?
mine as well.
Excuse me?
They were 4th on mine as well.
Oh, okay.
GRLA?
GRLA was in the bottom for me.
Oh, they were.
actually, oh, excuse me. I was looking at MMT. So GRLA was 4th for you, Kelly?
I had them as 4th.
Yeah, I don't think anybody else had them in their top 4.
Okay.
But
So this commission should think about how important W and MDE participation is in its compliance with Commonwealth regulations and ordinances and the city's own ordinances.
well, we don't have any ordinance that requires it. And since this is all city funded, we don't have any requirement, Mark, of doing that. If there was state funding, there would be a requirement.
Right.
Jeremy, have you done some numbers?
Yeah, so I don't have the top 8 for everybody, so I can't do it precisely. If you wasn't in your top 4, I kind of ranked them the same after that.
Yeah.
And as such, there's a quite clear distinction between the top 4 and everybody else. So CBI, RBA as 1 and 2, and DAI and RGB as 3 and 4.
So, I mean, that's typically the way we do it, is to do numbers and rank it. And so I am satisfied that based on those numbers, and I think as Mark said, and some other people have said, they all could probably do the job. I mean, they're all registered architects. They've all done plenty of roofs. And so our job is to whittle this down to 4 and then take it from 4 to 1 next week. So my suggestion is that a motion is in order to interview those 4.
Move to interview those 4.
Second,
And is there any further discussion? Anybody want to say anything? All right, go. Somebody, Jerry, oh, you were talking to somebody in your house.
Well, I'm talking, I was trying to.
Oh,
So there we are. I'm sorry about that. So I don't want to take away from the need of this project. I just have a little concern about the timing of the project. I mean, construction materials right now are out of control. I'm just kind of wondering whether or not we're doing this at a proper time, or we should be waiting for the cost of construction materials to kind of stabilize. I mean, right now, the cost of lumber and all this stuff is basically almost 4 times higher than what it was almost 1 year ago. So I do have concerns about that. I don't know if Mark had something to bring into that discussion.
Well, I'm well aware of the rapidly escalating costs of lumber and wildfires in the West over the past several years, and a building boom and a number of other causes for that escalation in price. Rubber roofing material, if in fact we're going to be replacing this with EPDM or TPO roofing, which is probably the most likely candidate for the most part, is petroleum based. And the cost of petroleum right now is lower than it has been, other than about a year ago, just because of the pandemic and the reduction of it. But I don't really know where the cost of petroleum based products are going to be 3 or 6 months from now. Mike, you're absolutely right. There are pandemic related shortages and other impacts to the construction industry, but I also know these buildings are leaking. I know that water is intruding down the face of walls, impacting expensive electronic goods. So if there's a small premium to pay for a slightly escalated building product cost, I think it's more than offset by the need of the fire department to protect their emergency response tools. So I know that this project has been on the wish list for longer than it should have been. So I've seen this damage, I've seen the water intrusion, and I don't think that it's in the best interest, my personal opinion, it's not in the best interest of the city to defer this project just because the cost of the building material may be a little bit more than it was a year ago.
And Mike, if I can add to that, interviewing design firms now and even engaging in a contract with the design firm doesn't lock us into construction prices. That if we go to bid and see things that, or if we learn more between now and construction, and it becomes an untenable number, we can make a decision at that point if construction becomes too costly. But right now, I think we're right to move ahead.
Yeah, Mike, I think you're right to raise those points. We were hearing this morning at the high school building meeting that there are shortages of drywall, joint compound, and I think plastic pipe. I think one of the 3 companies in the US that makes it shut down. So things are difficult in the construction field, and you were right to bring it up. But I also think that in general, we don't make the policy, we execute it. And so I think the policy of the city is to protect these buildings. But the point you raise is certainly a valid one.
Yes, thank you all for weighing in. I mean, you know me, I can't hold it in. I got to put it out there. I just wanted to raise that thing, and hopefully it doesn't come to bite us back on this one. Hopefully it will stabilize in the next 6 months. But
Yeah, hopefully. But you know, you end up with things like where Texas froze in February, and that caused enormous changes because there's so much that's made in Texas, events that we have no control over. But I do think that the one thing we have control over right now is preserving these buildings for the city. I'd hate to see these buildings go through another winter with that much water coming into them. But that's not our policy choice. We were tasked by the mayor with doing this. And so I think that's what we should do. Anybody have any other comments on the motion on the floor? Hearing none, then Jeremy, you want to take a roll call vote?
All right, to interview CBI, RBA, DAI, and RGB next Wednesday. Ed.
All right, yes.
Terry.
Yes.
Jerry.
Yes.
Andrew.
Yes.
Jackie.
Yes.
Kelly.
Yes.
Gail.
Yes.
Mike.
yes,
And Jack.
Yes. Okay, that's unanimous. I think that what we all should do is make sure that we look at the books that those, or electronically, whichever way you did it. I looked at books because I'm a dinosaur. I think we all should take another look at those 4 books. We should think of some questions that we want to ask everybody. I'm going to suggest that we don't want to violate the open meeting law, but we could all communicate with Jeremy. So if you have any questions, and Mark, especially you, if you have a list of questions that you think we should ask to everyone, I would ask you to share those with Jeremy so he can coordinate that, so we can at least come up with the top 3 or 4 questions that we want to ask every applicant.
And if, yeah, I was going to touch on that before we left. So I would ask you all for 2 things by the end of the week. One would be the questions you would like to ask. I would like to communicate those to the firms by Friday so they can have some time to more thoughtfully respond and give us a better answer. And second would be if you could send me, I don't have the 1 through 8 for everybody. I have, 1 through 4 and 5 for a few. If you can send me your 1 through 8, and then I will put that together and put it in the minutes that you'll see for next week.
Okay. Anybody? Mark?
I just wanted, with the communication from Jeremy to the respondents who will be invited, is there a duration for each interview?
Yeah, usually we say a half an hour, Mark.
Okay.
And so usually we tell them they have 20 minutes to present, and then there's 10 minutes for questions by us. And we always fail at that. And some people go longer and some people go shorter. but that's our general scheme of things.
Very good. Thank you.
Some people talk themselves out of it in the first 10 minutes, and and some people who may have been lower down in the initial rankings talk themselves into it and generate more questions. So it's always an interesting process.
Yeah, so we'll start the scheduling at 6:15 for, I'll do probably 35-minute blocks. And I will assign randomly between the 4 firms who gets to go first, second, third, and fourth. And I will let them know this week.
All right. And just remember, this will be live from Studley Elementary School.
We still have the ability to participate remotely should any of you not be able to, but school committee has been meeting in a adequately distanced fashion at Studley Elementary, so we will be there.
Yeah, Kelly, are you out of commission or?
I am. I'm still on crutches.
And so in a week, you probably are thinking you won't be able to get out of the house or not?
I'm not driving yet, not cleared to drive.
Okay. Somebody could pick you up if you wanted it.
That'd be fine. I'd love to join in person if I can.
Where do you live?
Right by
Yeah.
Studley. I'm not far. Right on Black Oak. And right at the corner of Black Oak and Stony Brook.
I have no idea.
Kelly, if you send me an email with your address, I'll make sure I pick you up. And
Absolutely.
we can pick you up about 5:15 or so if it takes that long to get you into a car.
That'd be great. Thank you.
All right.
I'll make sure that goes in the minutes.
All right. So are we ready to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second,
Jeremy?
Ed,
Yes.
Terry,
yes.
Jerry,
Yes.
Andrew,
Yes.
Jackie,
Yes.
Kelly,
Yes.
Gail,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and Jack.
Yes, we're adjourned at 6:16.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you.
everyone.
Have a good night.
Good night.